being recorded, and we're doing that, which I've just done, to so that they can be put on the website of Lighter Footprints, and for anyone who couldn't be here tonight to see to see the proceedings. So I hope that doesn't cause difficulties for anyone, but that's been the process we've followed in each of the forums we've had of this nature. Okay, so there are four candidates standing in Maranoa ward, and as Lynn indicated at the outset, not all candidates seeking election from any of the wards are attending, and of the four candidates, we have two joining us tonight. So welcome to Peter Campbell and to Jackie Carter, who are two of the four candidates. Thank you for your participation tonight. It's very much appreciated. In terms of the candidates who are not participating tonight, Cynthia Watson has sent apologies due to a prior family engagement, and we've had no response from Chris Pattis. So if I can talk a little bit about what we're hoping to do tonight, the purpose of the candidates forum is for candidates to introduce themselves and respond to questions. Residents can then cast more informed votes. Now, when we get to questions, while there's always a climate and environment focus in Lighter Footprints fora, questions on any other topics can be taken tonight, time permitting. The way we deal with questions is, and I hope most people are familiar with Zoom and familiar with the chat function on Zoom. But if you want to enter a question, you enter your question at any time. Diane will be monitoring the questions and ask them on your behalf. And if we get questions on similar topics, we'll probably combine them for a bit of efficiency. If you haven't used chat before, the Zoom menu should be visible at the bottom of this screen. You should see chat right in the middle there. If you click on or touch chat, the window should appear, and at the bottom of the chat window is the place where you enter and you send your question. You may need to click on it before you can type on it. So I hope that's straightforward. And the difficulty, I suppose, is if it's not for you, you need to know how to use chat to tell me it's not. But unfortunately, for efficiency purposes, we found that's the best way to go about the question asking process. So without further ado, let's get started. Peter and Jackie have, as I think they know, 5 minutes to introduce themselves and answer three questions provided to the candidates in advance. And Diane either has or will place the three questions into the chat. I think she's done it already. Thanks, Diane. So, and after the introductory statements, Diane will put your chat questions to Jackie and to Peter. We'll conclude when either there are no more questions or at 9 p.m, whichever comes first. So I'll throw over to you, Peter, going in strictly alphabetical order to start with. I think you've just win that one. So over to you for an introductory statement.
Okay, thanks for that. And thanks for the opportunity to participate in this forum. I was a member of Lighter Footprints going back about 10 years and active for about 5, but I've been less active over the last 3 or 4. So I'm standing for the Maranoa ward in Boroondara. as per the session we're in. I'm passionate about our open spaces, sustainable transport, and provision of quality services to the community. So that's the reason I'm running, really, to lift the game as far as council doing things to benefit the community. And I would include in that looking after the environment and taking action to mitigate climate change, which includes, I will talk about details around that later. So during my IT career, I worked in various industry sectors, including education, health, transport, finance, energy, and government, including local government. So a lot of that was as an IT consultant. We renovated our house to a 7-star standard in 2001, and that included solar panels and batteries way back then, with water tanks and passive solar design. So the house was open for the Solar House Day initiative a couple of times. We had, I think the record we had was about 400 people through in one day. Created the Green Living Pedia website in 2006 as a resource for sharing information on renewable energy and climate action, amongst other things, and the environment. So on council, my focus will be on responsible spending, basically getting bang for our buck. There's a lot of money going into buildings, not so much money going into transitioning off fossil fuels, including the Q-Rec Centre, for example. The current design for that, they're putting gas boilers in there, which is the wrong thing to be doing in this day and age. Yeah, so I think that's about it for the intro. I've got a website. I might put a link in the chat for that. So there's more information about me and my background up there, and also priorities. Do we move on to the questions now?
No, I think we get. I think we go to Jackie next, Peter, and then the nature of the questions is they're given to both candidates to answer. We're looking for generic questions rather than questions to each individual candidate. Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, and certainly a link to your website in the chat would be most useful. Jackie, over to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So yeah, my name's Jackie and I've lived in Baldwin for the last 15 years. I am a renter. I'm an IT professional and a mediocre netballer. I'm also a member of the Greens, and I want to be really upfront about that because I believe that really gives you a framework of what my values are. I'm also a member of the local community. I volunteer locally in the Q East Community Recycling Group, and I'm also a member of the Willsmere Community Garden. And I decided to stand for council because I felt as though our current council, and particularly our councillor in Maranoa, no longer reflects our community values. And through the thousands of doors that I've door knocked in the last few months, that's what I've been hearing back from Maranoa residents as well. So we're so blessed to live in Maranoa, but I really think council has somewhat lost its way in recent times and have been focusing on big projects that the community doesn't necessarily want. And at the expense of ratepayers. And we have a real opportunity this election to inject some fresh ideas and fresh faces into council. And I'm really hoping that I can be one of those people.
Okay, thank you for that, Jackie. All right, well, Diane, I think we're singularly lacking in questions at the moment. Is that?
I was just wondering, Michael, if the two candidates wanted to particularly, seeing we've got time, address in a bit more specific detail the questions that are in the chat. The 3 questions.
Sorry, can I ask this question? So originally in the communication that was sent out to us, it was like the introduction was to include the answer to the 3 questions that we were sent beforehand, but then I feel like Michael said don't include them just then, so I didn't include my answers. So I'm not sure.
Well, if I gave that impression, I'm sorry, that's misleading. So perhaps I'll give you both another opportunity to do
Because I have
precisely
answers to
that.
those questions.
Yeah, no, that's
Thank you.
if that was not my intention, but if I've done that, apologies, and let's follow Diane's suggestion. Jackie, perhaps I'll give you first dibs to have a specific answer to a specific response to each of those three questions.
Beautiful. So yeah, pertaining to the specific three questions that were provisioned to us prior to this forum, which I believe are in the chat so that the participants can see them. I honestly believe that councillors are leaders in our community, and they should therefore be leaders in the areas of climate change. And from my perspective, I believe that means leading by example. So taking charge and using their platforms for advocacy, awareness, and community engagement. I think we have been sold by big business that the individual feels like they're carrying the weight of actions on climate change. And although that's not true, there are things as individuals we can do to make a difference. So I am almost a full-time PT user. I'm vegetarian and I'm passionate about reducing waste. I think that I would love to highlight the ways that I make these changes in my life and work with the community on how they can more easily implement these changes too. So that's the first question. I don't know if you want me to continue to the other two, or maybe we can transition back to Peter. I don't know.
No, we'll keep going, Jackie.
Okay. Second question, which is, I believe, what changes to the climate action plan or additions I would like to see. So two areas of the climate action plan that I'd be keen to focus on is getting renters and low income households off gas and embracing a circular economy. So as a renter, I know all too well how it feels getting left behind in the space of transitioning off gas and feeling helpless in the sense that I can't really do anything about it. And I'd really like to incentivize landlords in Boroondara to transition their investment properties away from gas, and that could be done through discounting rates or working with the state government on grants to expedite that transition. And as previously mentioned, I am really invested in recycling, but I don't believe recycling is enough. We really need to work on reducing consumption. And that starts with making that more accessible and easier at our local level. So council could implement shared bike or car services, expand toy libraries to include cooking equipment or electronics and tools, facilitate clothes swaps within the community. I'm pretty sure at this point we all know through some of our really superstar local initiatives by Boroondara Hard Rubbish Rehome and QE's Community Recycling that our community has a real appetite to invest in this circular economy. And so I'd really love to see council championing this area more as well. And then finally, with regard to community engagement, so I believe that community engagement is about meeting people where they're at. People are busy, they're very time poor, and we know through such low engagement of the council community consultation surveys that although people care and they have opinions, that they're time poor and they don't have the capacity to fill out the surveys or attend council meetings. So being present in the community is how community engagement is done best. Being accessible and available. I would love to host community barbecues, community forums, both online and in person, pop-up stalls regularly. I feel like too often the burden is placed on the residents to seek out ways to have their voices heard, and I'd really like to change that by being places that residents already are. And that's me.
Good, thank you, Jackie.
No worries.
Peter.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Michael. First question around time playing a more significant leadership role? I think the answer is yes. I've sat through several council meetings where I've advocated for budget to be allocated for cycle paths, amongst other things, for sustainable transport, which has a knock-on effect or the added benefit of reducing emissions if we can get cars off the road. Unfortunately, I think some of the councillors are too busy playing politics. There's a political sort of party influence on council, and there's a lot of game playing. And I saw it last night in the Delegated Services Committee meeting, statements being made where people are actually off topic and they're not representing the community, they're representing their political parties. And that's not actually transparent. That's not clear to voters. And including this election where we've got candidates that are running, that are calling themselves independent, but they're members of political parties. Now, Jackie's the odd one out, really, because she's saying, well, I am a good Greens candidate. Oh, and we've got as well. So that's good because that's transparent, but I still think there's no place for party politics on council. It has quite a negative impact. So council can really walk the talk, I think. There's strategies and plans, but the actions are not as good as they could be. So a new initiative that I propose to include in the next climate action plan would be a funded program to get residents off gas, because at the moment there's solar panels on roofs, but there's not a focus on getting rid of gas. So for people who are probably aware that gas is the last sort of Trojan horse of the fossil fuel industry, we're actually increasing our use of gas, we're increasing our exploration, and it's just another fossil fuel, and it's been getting prohibitively expensive because we seem to be able to export it but not keep enough in Australia. So getting off gas has got to be a priority, and Electrify Boroondara are an example of a community group that's doing a lot of good work on that. My screen's frozen. Can everyone hear me?
Everyone can still hear you, Peter. I agree. Your screen is frozen, but you're coming through loud and clear.
Yeah, no worries. So, and I'll note that the council did not fund or chose not to allocate funding to Electrify Boroondara. And I'd question why. And that's, you know, if they're going to adopt a leadership position, then they would fund community initiatives like that, or at least contribute some funding, not fund the whole thing. Another idea or another thing they could do is conduct a community battery and microgrid trial to provide power to residents, which can operate during blackouts and can now actually refactor the grid away from the fossil fuel power stations and actually use, because we've now got almost too much solar energy, and until we actually get microgrids operating and some storage capacity. So big batteries are one thing, but we can have community batteries as well. And I'll note that there are 5 or 6, including places like Apollo Bay, where they're actually doing this, and Yakandanda. So Boroondara, it's not even on their radar at the moment. The other thing I'll note, having bought an EV recently, is the council's got 2 EV chargers in all of Boroondara, and there's actually big queues for those. Now, you can charge at home, but if you want to use a publicly available charger, well, good luck. You know, there's one down at the Hawthorn Rec Centre, and there's another one out in Burwood, almost on opposite ends in the electric. There's nothing in Maranoa. And I see a lot of electric cars around, and presumably most of them are charging at home, but the uptake of electric vehicles on its own isn't going to solve the climate crisis, but they're definitely better than fossil fuel vehicles. Having said that, if every fossil fuel vehicle on the road is replaced by an EV, we're still going to have traffic jams. So we need to focus on sustainable transport. The funding allocated for active transport, cycling and walking, wheeled mobility is very low in Boroondara.
Just another half minute, Peter, thanks.
Okay. So final comment is around the community engagement. Yes, I think there is room definitely to improve community engagement. And Boroondara Bulletin, we get that regularly, and I don't actually see much in there about reducing climate emissions, about transitioning away from gas, those sort of topics. There's a lot of community related content, but there isn't much around those matters. It's almost like the CSIRO apparently were banned from talking about climate change. Boroondara Council seems to be a bit averse to that as well, so that needs to change.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thank you to our audience who've been
With some
a bit busy
questions.
with some questions. So, Diane, I'll let you go to it.
Okay. Look, I'll just go through them, but there are two really which are on about issues around tree canopy and removal of trees and enforcement problems about removal of trees. And I guess we'd like you to just comment on what you think should be done. Boroondara's just developed a new policy. What are you thinking about in terms of tree canopy? What are the issues?
Yeah, so I've got that down under an environment policy, and it is climate related because the urban heat island effect and trees have obviously got a major mitigating factor to that. It's, as far as residents I've spoken to, it's the number one issue in Mailing Ward. Developers are knocking over heritage trees and high value trees because it's the cost of doing business. They'll pay the $20,000 fine for each tree. They're happy to do that, and they're knocking them over, including the council trying to stop them and not being able to. So the fines for knocking down trees needs to be increased, I'd say, to 50,000 or something, which will actually provide a serious disincentive for them to do that. And we could make it higher, but that's something I'll be advocating strongly for because I'll say it's emerged as a number one issue.
Jackie, although I'd like to, I did enjoy David's visual participation there. We might have muted people, but I'm loving the facial expressions I'm getting from a number of people who've got their cameras on. So, anyways, Jackie, to you on canopy issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we know, well, I feel like I know through just general interactions, as I said, through door knocking and chatting to people, that our tree canopy is something that is one of the primary concerns of people in Boroondara, including in Maranoa. In that most recent tree canopy strategy that was done with council, I think only maybe like 650 or 700 people actually responded to that community consultation, which is so disappointing, and it just feeds back into the point where I feel like we need to be engaging with people in a different way, because I feel like that doesn't even capture half of the sentiment of the people. Like 600 people out of 120,000 or whatever it is ridiculous. But that being said, I do agree with so much of what Peter said in terms of developers considering the cutting down of significant trees in the area, the cost of doing business. It really needs to be commensurate to the project or to the building that they are trying to erect, because yeah, if it's just a flat 5,000, 10,000, whatever, that's just built into the cost of doing business, and that's never going to actually save our significant trees that we need to hold on to. And even if people are saying that they're going to, replant trees or whatnot, there's no sapling that can replace a 200-year-old tree and the carbon capture that tree provides to our area. So there really needs to be stronger consequences for those that choose to go outside the parameters that we have within Boroondara.
The other comment I'd make around the policy settings is that the current tree canopy target is 30%. I've taken advice from a landscape architect who works in this area, and she says that's too low. It should be around 50. So I'd certainly be looking at getting further evidence to support strengthening that policy to 50%. And if we need to put a $200,000 price on a tree to stop the developers, well, perhaps we need to find a way to do that.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Will I do the next one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll do the one after that, Diane.
Okay.
Thanks.
So there's a couple here I'll put together. Oh, there's a couple of comments really on rubbish collections and whether they should be fortnightly or weekly. And I'm assuming we're talking about the throw out rubbish collections here, not the others, which are weekly. So would you both like to comment on that, your views just about rubbish and recycling and so on in Boroondara?
So I'll go first, given Peter went first last time, if
Yep.
that's all right.
Yeah, no, that's the idea. Sorry,
Yeah.
we a little bit of slack facilitating there.
All right,
I
I'm
should have made that
facilitating for
clear.
you.
All good.
I tell you what, rubbish collection is one of the most polarizing discussions that you can have with people in the community. And I know, as somebody who lives alone, that I don't need a general waste collection every week. Absolutely not. I can go 6 weeks without it. But I know young families absolutely need it a lot more often than what I do. Like the amount of feedback I get about them having dirty nappies in their waste bin for weeks on end, and that's just not a really amenable solution for them. So I think there does need to be some kind of allowance for people who do need that more frequent collection. That being said, I do believe that there is so much education that needs to go on within the community that can reduce people's general waste, because I know, as someone who is educated in what can be recycled and what can be moved and whatnot, I have very little actual waste. So I think it starts with that education piece, and then from there we need to move into the I guess evaluation of actual need, because I think the weekly I feel like a weekly general waste is probably not necessary for most of the community, is my perspective anyway. Over to you, Peter.
Oh yeah, thanks. So yes, there are some people that feel very strongly on this topic. I haven't encountered them recently, but I have previously. It's certainly come up as an issue. So having visited Switzerland recently, got friends in Geneva. It's interesting there. They actually don't have trucks driving around picking up waste at all in the outskirts of Geneva. What they have is waste collection areas where residents walk and put their stuff separated into a variety of different bins, some of which are cleared daily. And it is about 8 or 10 different items in those bins. So it's possibly something we should think laterally about, rather than just having the trucks driving around burning fossil fuel or gas or whatever they're running, and also creating a pretty big impact in the streets. So I think council probably needs to survey residents to find out what the demand is for the restoring weekly collection for the disposable rubbish, the hard rubbish. But there also needs to be a lot of effort going into reducing it, because just collecting it more frequently arguably encourages people to generate more of it. So in the recycling, there's talk about bringing in a 4th bin for glass, I think. But if these are all trucks driving around picking up these different bins, then we're going to have 4 trucks down the street rather than 2 or 3. So on the hard rubbish collection, we've got 3. On normal days, we've got the FOGO green waste, and we've got the recycle. So I don't think having more trucks driving around is a good idea, and I'd certainly like to look at the idea of setting up areas where people can deposit things, kind of like what happens with the soft plastics at the moment. I think it's good that Boroondara is doing soft plastic collection, and that's in response to demand from the community.
Yeah, and I've got to say, as a user of that facility down at the Wellesmere Depot, it's heavily used, and I guess from that comment you'd be you'd be in favour of its continuing provision by council, because that was by no means clear that they were going to do that.
Yeah, well, let's talk about them.
That's a question to both of you, obviously.
Yeah, so as far as I understand, that's a temporary solution while they're waiting for some Victorian government level thing to happen. But, that's the sort of thing that needs to be a permanent solution. And if the state government's not doing it, then council needs to keep doing it. Incidentally, going in there in a car is a real hassle. On the e-bike, it's much better because I can just zip straight in, park it outside the gate and then walk in, so you don't get caught up in the traffic jams.
All right, I think the next question was hold on. Sorry, I've hit something I shouldn't have. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, there's a question. There's been a number of kind of discussions around active transport of various different kinds. There's a question in the chat about encouraging mobility scooters, but there's also probably a question as to whether Boroondara needs a more specific active transport strategy. Would the candidates care to comment on that?
Yes, I can certainly provide comment on that. I've just put a link up in the chat to a page I've got around walking and cycling. I prefer not to call it active transport because active transport, a lot of people don't know what that is. And when they bundle walking with cycling, the two things don't necessarily always go together.
Correct.
So wheel mobility is very important, and it covers things like wheelchairs and scooters, mobility scooters, kids on bikes, people pushing prams, etc. So it's all forms of wheel mobility, and having paths to do that away from roads is actually very important. And I was through my activities with the Boroondara Bicycle Users Group, I was a participant in and contributor to the Boroondara Bicycle Strategy, and unfortunately the council watered down some things that was in the previous strategy, and that was done for political reasons, actually in Maranoa ward. Specifically, they removed a trail that was going to be providing connections for kids to get to school, students to get to school across Kew High, Baldwin High, Greythorn Primary, etc. Now that was taken out because presumably the councillors didn't like bikes. Now, I don't know what it is that people start getting agitated about this, but having a gravel path connecting up those parks, if you notice the new level pedestrian crossing going in on Baldwin Road, that was actually put in for that trail. Now, the crossing's needed anyway, but some of the councils were opposing having that crossing go there, and they're now taking credit for it. But I digress slightly. The Hawthorn to Box Hill Trail is another matter which is outside of Maranoa ward, but the proposal is to build a shared path, so for pedestrians, cyclists, joggers, etc., all the way from Box Hill through to through to Richmond. There already is a trail that goes from Ringwood to Box Hill, but if you look at the map of Boroondara, there's a black hole in the middle as far as cyclists are concerned. There's no safe route to go east-west. You've got to go down to Gardners Creek or up to the Coonung Trail. So council is currently doing some work on that. It's more of a state government issue, so it's a matter of harassing the state government and getting them to allocate some funding. But I've actually asked council to put in applications for federal grants so we can get some money to get things moving, because at the moment there's $0 allocated. There was a feasibility study done on that trail about 3 or 4 years ago at the cost of $370,000, and it said the trail was feasible and would cost 80 million. And at the time the response was, oh, well, where are we going to find $80 million? And then suddenly they find $640 million to get rid of 2 level crossings at Surrey Hills. So I've put a link to the walking and cycling stuff that I've got up on my website, and I'll stop there because I could keep going.
Yeah, I was about to say I think technically we were giving you 1 minute,
Yeah.
but Um, but I kind of figure we're having a good. I kind of figure we're having a good conversation. We're going until 9, so provided we give Jackie equal time,
Jackie.
I think that's a reasonable way to go. So, Jackie, active transport.
Yeah, I'm just not that I wasn't listening, Peter. I kind of forgot what the question was.
Well, it was really, it came from a question from the chat around whether council should be doing more to encourage people to use mobile scooters, and I turned that into a question around whether there was a need for a specific strategy on active transport. So
right. Okay. So I guess just speaking to active transport as a concept and how I think that plays into our area as a whole is that I think that I don't know about most people here, but I exclusively walked or rode to school as a child. And I believe that that is a lot less of an occurrence these days because rightfully so, parents are worried about the safety of their children and them employing such things as riding and walking. And you know, that has a lot to do with the active transport infrastructure as well as things like local speed limits and things like that. But we have a propensity in our current, I guess, political climate to continue to expand roads at the expense of not investing in both public and active transport infrastructure. And we know that by investing in those, by investing in more roads and whatnot, that leads to induced demand. So we need to be doing that in the active transport space and investing in the infrastructure that makes walking, riding, scootering, whatever it is, easier for people, because then they will naturally gravitate towards that. We don't need more traffic lanes. We need more people getting active and using public transport. So I feel like I went on a bit of a tangent there, but I feel like my position's known.
That's fine. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie.
Diane, have you got another one?
Yeah, there's another question there from Bernie about besides the Kew Swimming Centre, which people have mentioned, what specific current council activities would you hope to change? Bernie, are you looking at budget and so on there, allocation of... Yep. Yeah, I can't turn you on, sorry.
Oh, where's Bernie?
Maybe.
Yes,
There.
looks like that. And
Oh, there we
looks
go.
like that,
Did that
Bernie.
work?
Yeah.
Just something where they're wasting money that you think should be redirected. Okay.
Thanks, Bernie.
So one example there is they're planning to actually completely redevelop the Kew Library. And a lot of people think the Kew Library, I think it was refurbed only 5 years ago, and people are happy with it the way it is. And I'd question whether it's worth spending millions of dollars to redevelop a facility that is actually functional and could be spruced up a little, but do we need to knock it over? And the other example I'll give is local playgrounds. I'm not sure how many of you have noticed that rather than fix up or maintain local playground, councils seems to have a current propensity to completely remove a playground, stick it in a container and send it to India, and then rebuild it at the cost of $200,000 plus. And I've challenged that on a couple of occasions and got the response that, well, some of the stumps were rotten. And I've dug down and couldn't find any rotten stumps. But I tell you what, it wouldn't cost $200,000 to replace a few stumps. So there seems to be a bit of a penny wise and pound foolish thing with council at the moment. And some of the pavilion rebuilds, like Ferndale Park, $4 million to rebuild one pavilion. So I think we've got to put, the other big thing is they've spent $80 million on the customer portal. Now, I work in IT. That's a waste of money. council shouldn't be developing software, then we shouldn't be paying tier 1 consultants to do PowerPoints. We should be subscribing to software as a service for councils, which is available and in use by many councils across Australia. So there's certainly an opportunity, I think, to put some careful examination on where the money's going and figure out whether we're putting it in the right place. And I'd argue that in some of those examples, we're not putting it in the right place.
Jackie.
I think sorry, Diane, after you.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so just to echo what Peter said, specifically on the Kew Library redevelopment, I believe that there are many objections to that occurring in the community, particularly after, I feel like everyone's a bit gun shy after the Kew Rec Centre. And I understand that there are similar plans to redevelop the Hawthorn Library as well in the same way, in the same knockdown rebuild capacity. Whereas I think that there is a lot more opportunity that we should be looking at to refurbish. And not only is that important to maintain the amenity of those areas so that we can still have functional use of them while parts of them are going under refurbishment, but also the climate impact upon those things. When you are knocking down buildings and rebuilding, the carbon that is released from that process is immense, and we should really be looking at always trying to refurbish rather than knock down and rebuild, because the climate impact upon that process particularly is unacceptable in my view. And they're the areas we should always be looking to refurbish rather than knock down and rebuild.
Okay, I've got a question of my own, which is I was out on the Coonung Creek Trail this morning, and that's about to get substantially diverted as a consequence of work on the Northeast Link. What do you think council needs, what if anything, do you think council needs to do to minimise the impact upon Boroondara ratepayers of the Northeast City development, Northeast Link development? Jackie.
No worries. So
In the chat, and apologies.
no, that's all right. I guess this feeds on to what I previously said about the fact that you can't build your way out of traffic congestion. So building the Northeast Link isn't going to really help with our traffic congestion. It's going to create induced demand. So the project was flawed from the beginning. And so I was never on board with it to begin with. But it feels like we are stuck with it from this point, and we really need to make sure that what residents are left to deal with is the best we can advocate for them. And I know that a lot of people in the area are particularly concerned about the pollution levels, the noise levels, the changes to the public transport routing. There are a lot of things that we should be advocating for at this point in time that aren't set in stone, that we could be getting better outcomes for our residents. So although I wished that particular project never occurred, we are some way through that. And I think that we should really be trying to get some of those outcomes for the residents, because it's really disappointing how it's gone thus far.
Thank you, Jackie. Peter.
So induced demand's a big problem. That freeway's been widened, I think, twice, and now is going to end up being, I think, 16 lanes or something in going under Doncaster Road. It's a massive road project, and I think there'll be traffic jams on that project once the road's open. And so consequently, there'll be people getting off it and then clogging streets like Union Road, Baldwin Road, Belmore Road. So council really needs to be taking a very strong advocacy position to minimise impacts of the project, both during construction. As you point out, the bike path is being shifted when they put the diversions in. Often they're unsafe and they're very haphazard. This is something the Bicycle User Group is constantly hassling council about, but also the project. And look, if we improve public transport, so extend the 48 tram down to the Greythorn shops, if we ever did build a railway down the middle of that instead of now down the middle of the Eastern Freeway rather than turning it into high occupancy vehicle lanes, then we'd have less cars on the road. So the impacts on parkland, the path that's running along there at the moment, there's actually a pedestrian path running next to the shed path. And some of the cyclists going along there are moving fairly quick because they're wanting to get into the city. So unfortunately, with the Northeast Link, they're going to get rid of the pedestrian path and push everyone back onto the shared path. So we've gone backwards on quite a few counts there. And I don't see the council actually taking enough of a proactive position to get some better outcomes there. So I'd be looking at focusing on that.
Okay, I'm going to raise one more, and that's really about the state government's proposed changes to planning for activity centres. Now, I know that's Camberwell at the minute, but I think it has pretty broad implications. Certainly all councillors will have to grapple with what this is going to mean. Big issues around housing, who gets housing, who doesn't, how do you make more housing, where's infrastructure? So would you both like to just comment on that? I think it'll be sort of a defining issue for the next council in some ways. Jackie, do you want to have another go at going first, seeing you missed 2 in a row?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that we are all pretty disheartened by the fact that council's jurisdiction over some of these planning laws has been moved into the state government. However, that being said, I do appreciate the frustration that comes from the state government when trying to expedite housing, which we are obviously in such short supply of, and the need to get more of this housing actually built. I don't think that, I think if the local government areas were more amenable to building more housing, then perhaps those particular changes may not have been made. And I know it's not only in Boroondara. We have a bit of a culture of, dare I say it, NIMBYism, particularly in the inner east. And so it's really difficult to manage the wants and needs of people who are in the current area with the demand of the housing that is required for our population. So although I disagree with how it's been done, and I disagree with the carte blanche taking away of the powers from local government, and also the really, I guess, lackluster attempt at community consultation within this, I do see some merit in why this is being done, but I don't agree with how it was done.
Peter.
Oh yeah, so I attended the Boroondara session that was put on just after or just before, actually just before we ended the caretaker period. And there was a good address there by Scott Walker, the Director of Planning. And the key message from it was that the council wasn't engaged in, wasn't part of any consultation relating to the high use centre or the high use boundary that they put around the community plan, the junction plan. I provided some input for the junction plan, and I think everyone was happy with that. There was pretty good community consultation around it. The state government actually ticked off on that, but then they drew this boundary around it, the 800-metre boundary, and said, well, we're going to allow high-rise, buildings up to 6 stories, and potentially they can go straight through without any recourse to VCAT if someone decides to put one next to a heritage house, etc. So I also attended the Delegated Service Committee council meeting last night and addressed that there. And the council officers have just done a report, and this is happening in the middle of the caretaker period. So it's unusual to say the least, but the state government consultation with council and with the community has been very poor on this topic. And whilst I think everyone agrees we need more housing, the Director of Planning said last night that the way this proposal or the way this plan is currently formed, it's not necessarily going to get us more housing, certainly not more affordable housing or public housing. So I think my suggestion to the council was that they request an urgent meeting with the Victorian Planning Minister to talk through some of these concerns. I got a flippant response from one councillor who said that they've been trying to have meetings for the last 18 months and haven't been able to get one. Well, the CEO later clarified that they did have a meeting booked with the Minister for 23rd of October, but then that was rescheduled into early December. So the key takeaway is that no one really has much confidence that the current plan that's been put forward is going to be particularly good at increasing housing and may have some serious negatives for the community. But there's about 6 major streams of changes, and Res Code's one of them. So with all these different things changing, it's very difficult. And then with this happening during the caretaker period, the council hasn't been able to really, the current council hasn't been able to get the bit between their teeth and do something about it.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a question just come in that says, wondering what the candidates' thoughts are on the diversity of council currently, and what, if elected, they can do to encourage underrepresented groups to get involved. Peter, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, so I guess thinking laterally here, I think if we had multi-member wards, that's where you have larger wards with, say, 3 candidates per ward. The state government basically put through legislation to abolish multi-member wards about 6 years ago or something. So the key with multi-member wards is that the threshold for getting elected, if you've got 3 members in a ward, is 30%. You don't have to get 50%. So it tends to favour diversity amongst the community, younger people, people from different backgrounds, people of different genders, etc. Now, that's more of a state government issue, so the council can't actually do anything about that at this point. I think council needs to get out there and actually engage with the community to say, well, here's what council does, because a lot of people don't actually know what council does. They don't know who their councillors are. So they need to get on the front foot and actually engage with the community, and then make it clear that there is opportunities for people to actually get on council, and work for council for that matter. It's council meetings at the moment are a bit of a dark art. Like, if you sit through them, they can be quite painful and quite tedious. So there's work to be done to make council a friendlier place. It's more specifically council meetings, and to get the community better engaged about what's going on.
Jackie.
I guess to speak to the current diversity of the current council, I feel like it's pretty lacking in diversity, which is unfortunately very Boroondara-like. We are a little hesitant to step outside our very white heritage, well, new heritage anyway, which is something that I am particularly keen on highlighting if I were to get to council, is our Indigenous history, because I don't think that we really value that a lot in Boroondara. We're very keen to preserve our heritage of our houses that have been built in the last 150 years, but there's not a whole lot to be said about our Indigenous culture and preserving that. So that is something that I would really like to highlight if I would be elected to council. And then when it comes to encouraging more diverse people to feel like that they can be represented on council and have the ability to run for council, I think it's about making spaces for those people and having those conversations and making room for them to feel like they can ask those questions. Like, I know that when I don't see myself represented somewhere, which luckily as a white woman is not too common in this day and age, but it makes that task seem insurmountable. So by giving people the option and the access and resources to people in leadership, I think is really important to making sure that people feel like they can see themselves in those positions.
Diane, have you got anything more?
I think that's sort of most of them, I think.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah.
Just on the diversity on council, I guess it's not necessarily diversity, but Victor Franco sort of led the charge as a solo councillor to get rid of the Christian prayer, because council is actually secular, not religious, but we had this Christian prayer at the start of every meeting, which disenfranchised everyone who's not Christian, or certainly doesn't represent people that aren't Christian. He got a lot of opposition from the current councillors about that, and they tried to gag him and stop him talking to the media, etc. But he kept going, and he actually got an outcome. And that's an example. That's the sort of forward action that we need to get better diversity on council across ethnic backgrounds and gender.
Yeah, I guess as someone
go, Jackie.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just like, as someone who is a renter and under 40, I feel like I would be a unicorn on council in terms of diversity. So, yeah, I just really feel like we have so much opportunity in the diversity space, and it's just like a little baby step for Boroondara to go, oh yeah, we could maybe elect somebody who is a renter and is a bit younger.
Well, Philip Mallis was a councillor for Maranoa before the current councillor, and he got elected at about age 21, and he was living with his parents, I think. So it has happened, but he's certainly the odd one out.
Okay, well, I think I agree with Diane that I think we've covered most of the questions. Thank you. There's also a few comments in there, and welcome comments as well, but we're asking questions rather than relaying comments. If you feel you've got anything really urgent, you've probably got about a minute to put something in there. Otherwise, I'm going to invite each of Jackie and Peter to provide a wrap-up final statement. Jackie's also just put in her contact details, and of course this is only one forum in which you can engage with your councillors. I'm sure they've each provided online ways in which you can contact them and follow up any issues that you don't think have been addressed tonight. Okay, so let's move to a wrap up. Jackie, anything you'd like to say in a couple of minutes arising from tonight's really excellent discussion?
No, look, I came into this really scared that nobody would turn up. So I'm really happy that we've had like quite a few people and people that are engaged and had questions to ask, because that's what I'm here to do, is answer questions. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I'm not an expert on anything. I'm just a regular person who wants to serve the community and do better. And that's what I'm here for, because I felt that I've not been represented by my current councillor in recent years, and I really want to make sure that people have the opportunity to live in the best local government area that exists, and we all know that's Boroondara. So I just want to make that better for everybody who lives here and be the most accessible and present councillor that Maranoa has had. So thank you all for attending. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jackie. Peter?
Yeah, I also like to thank everyone for participating. It's really good to have that engagement. And I think this is the sort of engagement that we do need with councillors, given that there isn't actually a councillor present, but hopefully one of us here will get elected. And on my website, I've got social media links for Twitter, and I haven't actually got the LinkedIn link. I could put that up there as well, but I've got a web form where you can submit local feedback on matters that you think need attention, and I'll be monitoring that. There's already been a few items come in, and I'll keep a log of those so that I can say if I end up as a if I get elected as a councillor, then I'll have some sort of direct input from the community. But yeah, I think if everyone was as committed as everyone here, then we'd probably be in a better place. But we do need fresh voices on council. So if you know people in other wards that have got a good independent councillor running, then certainly have that discussion with them, because having the council dominated as it has been by one political party, I don't think it's been a good thing for the community. So we're looking to change that. I think that's the reason both Jackie and I are running, and a number of the other independents in other wards as well. So good on you folk, keep up the good work, and also thanks to a lot of Footprints for organising this forum.
It's a pleasure on behalf of the organisation. We think it's a really important part of the process, and as you say, a really great opportunity to engage directly with candidates, but that's only as good as the ability of candidates to engage. And I think probably everyone on this call would really like to thank both of you for the level of participation, the level of engagement. I know there's a few comments already on the chat about that. I've certainly learned a few things myself, and I'm sure I'm not on my Pat Malone in relation to that. So to Jackie, to Peter, thank you. All the best with your campaigns. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate. I suspect people on this call will remember Lynn's empty chair comment as we started. And thank you again. I think we've only got 10 minutes. People are welcome to join other wards if they want to see what's going on, but if not, it's pretty close to finishing time anyways. You just hit the button on your right-hand side that says leave, and have a great evening, everyone. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Cheers.
so much.
Thank you.